Welcome to the Crazy Might Work podcast, where we celebrate authors, entrepreneurs, innovators, inventors, and scientists who live at the very frontiers of human consciousness and possibility. We discuss their moments of breakthrough and analyze the strategies they use to enhance their own thinking and challenge conventional wisdom. Welcome to the Crazy Might Work podcast. Our guest today is a professional facilitator, coach, and learning and development expert with a love of the outdoors. Starting out as an outdoor instructor, he learned the power of experience in helping people transform. He's gone on to apply those same principles working with leaders and teams within organizations, ensuring the approach is about real change, not just head knowledge. Over the last 20 years, he's worked in a range of sectors, including government, corporate, and professional services. He's held regional roles in Europe as well as APAC, and currently works as the global head of leadership and personalised development for BSI. Some of you might know as the British Standards Institute. He became an ICF certified coach in 2016 and has completed his Masters of Education, Learning and Leadership at UTS. He's here to tell us about what is happening at the boundaries of learning and development in a leading multinational. Please join me in welcoming Matthew Elphick.
Thanks, Paul.
Great to have you, Matt. And this is such an interesting topic. I think Darwin, and I'm paraphrasing, said it's not the strongest or the smartest that necessarily survive, but the most adaptive. And I think if you transfer that to the learning environments, particularly in organizations, you can see how that might also be true. But I'd just love to know how you ended up where you are. So tell us a bit about your story and how you got into your current role ultimately.
Yeah, certainly. It's interesting because I've had a number of people sort of early on in their careers wondering the pathway to this kind of role. And I always say, there are so many ways, and mine is unique, and most of the people I work with have very different and unique stories. As you mentioned earlier, I started off as an outdoor instructor, actually. I studied philosophy, a little bit of psychology and English at university, so didn't really have a clear direction to go from there. But I do have a love for the outdoors. There was an opportunity to work at a conference centre as I was able to run outdoor activities such as rock climbing and canoeing, and that's where I began. And that was a great opportunity just to really understand how to support people through difficult times, but also how experiences can produce huge changes for people. And so in that space, I also was responsible for training up a lot of the outdoor staff. So that's where I got into the training side of things and managing others. So I got all that at quite an early stage. I went traveling and ended up in the Czech Republic, which was a very different place to be in, and excited to have that challenge and stimulation of a different culture, a different environment. And in order to live whilst there, I became an English teacher. So again, sort of learning different aspects of teaching and how people learn and develop. But quickly found myself back into that space of facilitation, running events for companies and senior teams and taking them out outside into the outdoors to learn how to work together better. In that process, I came across something really profound. It was quite interesting to notice that we would do a weekend or a full day with a team and talk around a range of principles with them and see what we would consider some insights and some shifts in how they worked. I had this one experience where a team, it was a senior pharmaceuticals team, and they wanted just to have some time at the end of the weekend to do one of their regular strategy meetings. And we said, oh, look, that's fine, but do you mind if we sit in on it? And we sat in and then watched how they interact as a team and noticed that all the stuff they'd been working on and talking about over the past 2 days had just gone out the window as they went back into their old habits. So that, for me, was a real aha moment around it. For real change, it has to happen in the context of the work people are doing, and usually over time, and it needs to be something that they're really owning and working on themselves. So that that was a key moment for me. And shortly after that, I went to start working within organisations, and the rest of my career I've worked as an internal learning and development specialist supporting teams. So I spent 10 years over in Europe working in regional roles. That was the time I came across coaching as well, and discovered how powerful a tool that can be in helping people identify solutions for themselves and take ownership over those. And then moved back to Australia in end of 2014. And there I was able to get some experience then in the Asia region, working across the Asia Pacific. Completed my Master of Education, which you spoke about. And I think for me, some of the real insights there, we're just getting some of that theory that sits behind a lot of the contemporary approaches to learning, and particularly how do you create emergent learning where you don't necessarily bring in the solution and teach and train other people to it, but create spaces very similar to coaching where people are able to really start to identify how to work better, how to work more effectively, and determine solutions or potential solutions from amongst that conversation amongst themselves. So that's a bit about my work history. I mentioned my love for the outdoors. You can see a bit of it being brought in here behind me. I'm also very passionate about something called permaculture, which is really about sustainable ways of interacting with the environment. And I've got my own edible garden in my yard, which you can't see from here, but it's a place that I love to spend time to really refresh and renew myself. But also I think there's a lot of principles in nature that can help us thinking about the best approaches to life, and so get a lot of learning from that as well.
Excellent. And Matt, I'm hearing that your formal education, interestingly, in this whole era of adult learning and education, came in some ways kind of post hoc, and I just think it's so interesting because I was reading a report by Alpha Beta, whom they prepared for the Foundation for Young Australians. I think it's the second or third version of that they've done, but they're saying based on that data now that they're expecting that people will do five different, significantly different careers in their working time, and maybe 17 or 18 different jobs within that. And I think there's just something in that, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, proverbially, which just how different. The question that I'm coming to is how different do you think adult learning is from what we might do at school or through our kind of through our tertiary education?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point because I didn't do a career shift, but did go back to further learning. And I think, my initial learning when I came out of school, I mentioned, was philosophy, English, psychology. I had no idea where I wanted to go, but just went down what things am I interested in. And I think that was extremely beneficial in just shaping some of my thinking and ways of working. But I'm really grateful that I went back at a much later stage to do my master's. And I think what that enabled for me is when I went back, I could really contextualize some of the things that I've observed and understood, and likewise apply that learning retrospectively into some of the situations I've been in. So I think I got a very different experience from that. And I think it is a critical thing for us to think about with learning, that yes, there is some aspects of learning that's really foundational. And certainly, I advocate people being able to go straight from school to university. I think that is a great opportunity. And I'm fine with the fact that in some ways it's very hard for people to then directly apply some of that learning. I think to some extent it is teaching them ways of working, ways of learning, ways of understanding the self better. But that in and of itself is insufficient. There is a need to be able to then, in the context of the work we're doing, be able to pull in and go, okay, well, what are some concepts or research that help inform and improve the way I'm doing things? So whether that's going back and doing a master's like I did, or simply engaging in courses or reading material, there's lots of different ways that we can do it. But I think there is a need for us to be able to really, another way to put it is to balance that theory and practice. We need those in balance, and the two aid each other. And the more that we can use them throughout our lifetime in balance, I think the more effective we can be.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to come back in a moment to something you said quite a bit earlier around us being able to learn from nature, and I'm interested whether you think there are any takeaways from a learning perspective, in terms of how nature or other species learn that we could apply as humans, in that Darwinian vein that I've started us in, but really interested in just momentarily your thoughts about how important is learning for an organization. So should that be on the strategic agenda? How important is it relative to other things? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think perhaps a more useful question to ask is how important is change for an organization? So if you're an organization that says exactly what we're doing now is all we need and is sufficient for the years to come, then there may not be much of a need for learning. However, most organizations I know don't have that view. They look at it and go, we need to be identifying new products, new services. There is a very changing environment around us, new competitors coming in, new needs from customers, and we need to adapt to meet those needs. Now, if that's your situation, you need to adapt, then that is learning in and of itself. Now, whether that's formal learning or learning through, just trial and error with the way you're working, you are learning. And as I mentioned before, ideally, we're balancing that theory and practice. So if I'm just learning through, okay, we need to make some changes, let's make them and see how they go, great. But how much better would that be if you can combine that with some external research, some best practice that's coming in, and an ability to really process your own impact on that, and to what degree you might need to shift and change some of the ways in which you act in order to achieve those outcomes you're looking for in the future. So I think learning is absolutely critical for organizational success, and having a good learning function within the organization that can help guide that and bring some of those insights into an organization is absolutely critical.
Matt, I just want to pick up on something that you said about balancing theory and practice. We often hear, and whether it's legal profession partners or just executives in other industries, just lamenting that there seems to be a huge gap when graduates come into the organizations, that they seem to know very little about applying any of those ideas in practice. You seemed in your earlier reflections to have more of a pragmatic perspective on that. But how do you see us? How much do we need to bridge that gap? And if we wanted to, what would some of the solutions be there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think to some degree, you do have apprenticeship programs and other systems in place that help people bridge that gap. For different industries, it's going to look differently depending on sort of what are some of the practicalities that people need to gain. There is an extent to which you're always going to have people hitting an industry and having to learn a lot on the go. And I think a big part of that is not just about what the universities are doing to adapt and improve the way they're preparing people, but what organisations are doing in terms of helping people when they start the role, understand what's needed and learn the skills, the whole onboarding piece that they need to get right.
I loved what you said about the change being the driver of learning. I think Drucker said that when the rate of internal change falls behind the rate of external change, in organisations in trouble. So I think that's a useful lens. I'm interested in how, in your current global role, how are you processing that? So what are some of the strategies, approaches that you're using within BSI to achieve those learning outcomes?
Yeah, so I think critical to this is actually what is the strategy at an organisational level. So your learning team needs to be partnering with your strategic leadership to be aligned to where are we heading, how are we going about doing that, and what are some of the changes that we need to support people through to get there. It means not just having your off-the-shelf standard programs that you've been delivering for the last 10, 20 years and going, great, that's everything we need. I can just keep delivering that, and then my leaders will go off and determine the direction of the organisation. Those need to be hand in hand. So a couple of ways you can be doing that. One, we do always look at, okay, what are some of our strategic imperatives as an organisation, and then how are we making sure that the learning we're doing is aligned to that, not just from a content perspective, but an actual practical perspective. So to what extent are we incorporating within our programs opportunities for people to go out and do some of the work that we need to be doing? And I think that is where you start to get, again, that theory and practice balance. We're not just pulling people out of their work, feeding them a whole bunch of information and saying, off you go, good luck, see how you go with it. We're actually creating situations where people have to get the work done. So a recent program that we did, we asked the participants to identify what is an area of improvement that you need to be focusing on that's beyond your current area of work. So they had to go out, do the research, identify some challenge for the organisation, get stakeholder buy-in around that, deliver back to say what they thought the need was, get feedback on that, and then go about and start to implement that program. So they were actually doing work for the organisation outside of their normal work as part of that learning program. Now, we supported them with some ideas and concepts to help them work on that. We supported them with mentoring and coaching opportunities so that they had that space to reflect and to learn from others. But the core of the program was them working on a real business challenge. And I think the more you can do that, the more that you can actually help the organisation as it goes about the changes it needs to make.
Sounds like a nice combination of self-directed learning and then matching that or telling it with organizational strategy and validating that before you commit too much time and effort to going down that rabbit hole. But just interested in how you evaluate these things. So how do you know if that's actually worked for you as an organization? What are the the telltale signs or KPIs or other measures of success that you employ?
Yeah, and I think that's always a challenging question. I don't think I've been in a single organisation or had a single conference where somebody's felt like they've got the full picture answer to that. And I think to some degree it will vary depending on the area that you're looking at. And I think you're going to have a range of ways in which you're pulling in and using KPIs. There's to some extent, there is an element where you're just providing a sense of opportunity for learning. And that's not a great transformational KPI to say, oh, yes, people had opportunities to learn and they were happy with the learning. But I think it's still important to have that there. So you've got that very base level, which can just be around amount of learning activity taking place, the feedback scores you're getting on the learning activity, your engagement scores and what people are saying about learning and development within the organisation. So I think that is useful. It's not sufficient, though. Where we really want to be able to get to is where we can point to particular initiatives that have helped sustain the sort of changes that you're looking for. And I think you need to really focus down on those key initiatives and go, where is one that we know this is a really significant, important program, and how can we really measure the effectiveness of that? So I'd recommend to any of the listeners that are interested in looking into it, the success case by Brinkenhoff, I think his name is. Might be getting it wrong there. The success case method is a way of actually identifying up front, and I think this is important as well, what's the reason for this change, intervention, learning program? What is it that we're trying to shift? How will we know when we've gotten those results? So having that almost outset of what are we trying to achieve, but also within that, you should be thinking, what's our theory of change? What do we think is going to produce that change? Is it just a bunch of training, or is there a whole range of things that we need to be implementing alongside of that? And then start to set up some simple measures that will enable you to evaluate how well that's worked. So an example from the past, we were putting through this actually working with a professional services firm. It was before the role I'm in now. And we identified the need that we needed to improve the amount of cross-selling, but also the amount that the partners within the organisation were bringing in and winning work. And so within a lot of professional services firms, you have those challenges of people that are very good technical experts working their way up, but then having to build and win business, which they don't necessarily always have those skills to do. And so that was the aim of our program. And we had a very simple measure as the outcome, which is how much new work are they bringing in. So easy one to measure when it's sales training. But again, I'd say that's insufficient. Just being able to go, great, this is the amount of sales that people made or the amount of cross sales that they were doing, doesn't yet give you the full detail of, well, how much of that was down to the program and what elements were down to the program. So what we did from that was then go back to those people, and again, this is all in the success case method, go back to those people that were successful and interview them and talk to them about, okay, what changed, what enabled you to get that work? And invariably, some of that, as you're talking to them, it's like, well, that's been in the pipeline for years. And you're like, okay, well, potentially we might not have had much of an impact on that in some of our recent interventions. But others will point back to key things that they shifted or changed that enabled that sales to go through where perhaps they hadn't seen it in the past. So that not only lets you say, hey, this is the impact this program has had, but it gives you that ability to go back and go, okay, what aspects of the intervention enabled that success, and how do we make sure we maintain those? And likewise, were there other bits that just weren't coming through? Now, we didn't do it in this situation, but he would also advocate talking to some of the people that didn't get results. I think that's really insightful as well. So what stopped them from getting the results? Because then you can look and compare and go, were there significant things that this group did that this group didn't do that enabled those results? So that does take a little bit of investment. It is a lot of work. And if you're able to focus on that on the most successful programs, that then gives you insights as to how to continue to evolve and improve your learning, but also measure and really validate the investment that has gone into it. So I'd say that's one end. The other end I talked about was just those simple KPIs. And then something in the middle that I've started to use a lot more of now is, how do you get people talking about the impact that the program has had towards the end of longer programs? So we've got a 9-month program for emerging leaders within our organisation. Throughout it, we're constantly asking them the question, what insights have you had and how will you apply those insights? And so it's just getting them to really have those practical applications from the program. And then right towards the end of the program, we invite our CEO in to meet with all of the participants, and they've each got a few minutes to talk about what impact has the program have, what changes have they seen it have on the way they're doing business. And we can listen through and then start to align those back to actually what were some of the key strategic drivers, and talking about what I was earlier, that actually there are key things within this program that are around our strategic aims as an organisation, and some of the things that we need to shift in order to achieve those. And we can actually track and see how many of these comments and what they've actually done is aligning to those.
And I'm hearing them some interesting terminology that you've used. One of those is around the concept of insights, and so I'm just wondering to what extent those are personal reflections or connections that those individuals have made, for themselves, and to what extent they might be market orientated or customer orientated, or externalized in some way. What's been your experience of that? How does that get defined in your?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it needs to be what are the individuals themselves saying has resonated and stood out to them. Whatever content you put in a program, people are going to hear some things, miss other things, remember some things, forget other things. So really the basis of understanding and evaluating learning needs to be around, well, what actually has been maintained. And one of the ways to get that that ability to maintain things is to give people that space for reflection. Because when something gets, I describe it as that sort of chewing through process of really working something through, reflecting on it, and then going out and continuing to reflect on it in practice. Because I'm sure everybody can think back to those moments where they thought of something or had some sort of a learning point and they've gone, oh, that's brilliant. They've gone out and it's failed miserably. It just hasn't gotten the results they expected it to. So your ability to go out, do that, what we might call experimentation. I go out, I give it a go, I evaluate it, I reflect back on, well, was there a faulty hypothesis there, or do I need to change my methodology slightly, and then try again. That's where you start to see change. But it all starts with that initial hypothesis. What do I think I need to now go and do differently? And so having the space for people to actually articulate what that looks like for them, and then to agree what they're going to do as a result, increases the chance they're actually going to go out and do it. I think, it depends on what the aim of it, but in most situations, it's not about them completing a knowledge test at the end of the program to show how much they've recalled. It's about what they've gone and done differently as a result and what kind of results they are getting out of those.
A 9-month program sounds like quite a substantial investment in a leader. Just tell us a little bit about that. So, how much of it is programmatic? How much of it is sort of self-directed or immersive, and if some of it is programmatic, what are the sort of big chunks of content that you found to be useful for that group?
Yeah, and I agree. A 9-month program is a big investment, and that's why we do have a range of programs varying from 90-minute slots and on-demand content people can draw down to some of these longer programs. So you really need to target your resources around what's important. And so in this case, we've seen this as there's a real strategic need to look at those emerging leaders to help them shift into more effective ways of leading. It is an application program, so we can have a limited number of people that we know are really the right people ready for the program. Then the program itself is broken down into a number of different segments. So we've got 5 modules where we've said, okay, this is content or areas that people need to focus on. Within each module, there is some preparation work that people go through, is something that they can go through in their own time. I think that's quite crucial for a couple of reasons. One is people pick up theories at different speeds. There'll be some people that are like, oh, yep, I know all about this. I've learned that before. There are other people, and, being in a global role, I'm working with people from all sorts of different cultures with all sorts of language capabilities. So there are some people that even just the pace in which they're able to hear something or go through something in English needs to be different. So there's the benefits around how they're actually absorbing that content. But also, I'm a strong believer when you've got people together, the most effective thing they can be doing is sharing their own knowledge with one another, talking about some of those challenges together, and starting to work out for themselves how they're going to apply it. So it's really what's sometimes termed as the flipped learning. It's not our job to teach a whole bunch of concepts and then tell people go out and learn how to apply it. It's our job as learning facilitators to create an environment where people can start to work through some of the trickier, grayer areas of application and get insights and ideas from one another. So very intentional. They'll do that beforehand. We've got live workshops where it is about what's the application of this. People are given those opportunities to discuss the application, to discuss how they're going to go about it, to hear from other people. We also have them in small coaching groups. So that's where they will come together and talk about current challenges. And it could be closely related to the content, or it could be completely outside of the content. But what that then builds is greater capacities to coach, which is an important aspect of the program itself. it's building that connection across the organisation. So one of the most common things I hear when I talk to people about programs is the benefits of actually hearing from people they normally wouldn't work with, hearing that they've had similar challenges in very different parts of the business. And there's that element of safety in, if I'm in a coaching group with somebody that kind of gets what I'm going through, but has no stake in that at all because they're in a completely different area of the business, it's much easier to be vulnerable, to talk about those challenges and to get their insights. So that coaching component is a key part of it. The workshops are another part of it. We also have what we call our leadership panels. So we bring in some leaders from the organisation, different levels of leadership, past participants, our executive team, and clients. So we'll bring in clients that are in leadership roles as well and get them to share their own experiences in those areas. And I think what that does is sort of, again, it gives that practical element. So they're talking in practicalities around what they're doing. But also to our earlier point around how do you make sure you're aligned to the business strategy? Well, if you've got your senior leaders talking about the challenges they're facing, that then really aligns them to what are these challenges and how do I apply them? So we bring those different elements of the program together. And as I mentioned, that time is a critical piece because they need those opportunities to go out, reflect and come back and to have those coaching groups they can work with. They also are assigned an individual coach that just helps them determine at the outset what areas they're going to focusing on and towards the end to reflect back on around how they're going to take that learning forward.
And I'm just interested, first of all, in just expanding a bit on coaching, because I know that this is something that you've very intentionally developed within the organization. So we can hear that it plays an important role in this leadership program. But maybe more broadly than that, or beyond the leadership program, how do you employ coaching as part of your organizational learning strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of my role. The personalised development aspect of my role is about our coaching and mentoring strategy and how we implementing that. I mentioned I first became qualified in 2016, but I think I've been using coaching since around 2009. The whole manager as coach programs that we were rolling out back in those days. So I must admit, when I first came across coaching, I was really skeptical. I found it really hard. The outdoor instructor in me that was, you need to know how to do this so that you survive and don't die. And then the English teacher that was very much, this is the right way, then came across this, letting people work it out for themselves, just asking questions. It took me a long while to understand. But within that, I realized actually, stuff that I've been talking about earlier, when people start to identify the solutions for themselves, it is more practical because it's really aligned to their situation, their experience. It's based on their understanding and it's more sustainable from that perspective as well. So whether it's the style that I'm using as a manager or the style I'm using as a facilitator, the coaching approach is a much more sustainable approach. And so for an organization, having that ability to help people identify solutions for themselves is extremely important. And I'd say it's important not just from people having access to coaches, it's important from building those capabilities within managers, but building those capabilities within groups. So the extent to which people can come together as a group, and I talked about how in that program, we bring them together into coaching groups. We've also done work with teams and team coaching where they're actually learning to ask questions of each other and together raise their collective awareness around what's happening and make some decisions around what to do differently. So for me, that is one of the most pinnacle forms of learning when people can start using coaching. So as an organization, we are doing all those things. We've got training for managers around how to coach more effectively. We've got situations which people are coming together and doing group coaching, and then we've got our own internal coaching pool. So we've got a pathway where those interested first will go through some of the basic courses to understand how to use coaching skills, and then if they're interested and committed to doing that even more, they can go through a program. We've got an external provider that run a qualification program aligned with the EMCC qualifications, and they can become an internal coach. We then use those internal coaches across the organisation, so match them with people requesting coaching from outside of their business area. We've asked each of our coaches to commit a portion of time per year to coaching and to agree that with their direct manager, but also we provide them with regular supervision, so external supervision to support that, and ongoing CPD sessions. So the result of that means that we do have quite a strong pool of internal coaches that are supporting people across the business. So pretty much anybody in the organisation that says, look, I'd really benefit from coaching, and puts in a request, gets a coach. And I think that's, a great place to be in, because I've been in organisations in the past where we've only used external coaches. There's real budget limitations to that. And so really it only ends up being the really, really senior leaders that you end up, or people that are on track for senior leadership roles, that get the coaching. There's loads of people that are just transitioning into first-time leadership roles, or having a significant shift in the organisation that they need to work through, that really benefit from coaching. And as an organisation, we're able to provide that. But also the benefit is on the other side as well. Those people in our coaching pool get great insights about the business, being able to support and work with people from different parts of the business, and develop their own capabilities to use coaching, which then reflects in their own leadership and the way they lead people in their teams or project groups that they're working with.
You used a term earlier, personalisation. So I'm interested in, BSI is a large organisation. I don't know how many leaders you have in total at the different levels, Matt, but first of all, how many do you have? And then how realistic is it to achieve a level of personalisation across all of those levels?
Yeah. So we've got over 1,000 leaders at the moment as an organisation, those people with people leadership responsibilities. And my title is Head of Leadership and Personalised Development. And that's recognising that when it comes to coaching and mentoring, the benefits of those approaches is that they can be personalised. And so when somebody says, look, I'd like to go on a program, there's an extent to which they can pick the right program that suits them. There are some programs in which they can pick and choose the learning that they get out of it. With coaching and mentoring, it's really, what is it that you want to focus on? Like, it is completely personalised from that perspective. Now, having said that, within our coaching, we do require three-way meetings so that they can sit down and agree with their manager as well as the coach, what area am I going to focus on, and what's the reason for that? Because obviously we're investing into their time, and we want to make sure it is aligned to the organisational outcomes. But that, for me, is one of the most effective ways that learning can be personalised. And I think there is a link back as well to what we're talking about with evaluation. So we are, I'd say, at the early stages of starting to evaluate some of that. We've really been growing our capabilities over the last couple of years. And over this last year, we've implemented feedback where at the end of the coaching process, we collect feedback from the coachee as well as the manager. And we use that feedback to inform our coaches, to help them to improve. But critical to that is we're able to find out what are the topics that you focused on in the coaching, and what of those were you able to achieve change with, and what was the impact coming out of that. Now, if you think of the richness of the data that you get from that, when I put somebody on a learning program, I can to some degree pull data to find out what are the programs that people are most interested in, and which ones are getting the positive feedback. When I start pulling data around what are the areas that you are requesting coaching on, and start to look at those themes, it can tell you a lot about the organisation. Where are people having their biggest struggles? Where are people focused on? And when you see the impact that that's had on them, again, you're seeing as people work one-on-one with somebody to identify what to change, what is it that's actually changing and evolving. So we're too early to actually say the insights we're getting from that, but I'm really optimistic around how much insight that's going to get us from an impact on the organisation perspective.
These ideas of personalisation, I think also that sort of data-driven evolution development of the program sounds progressive. Are there any other things that you think will shape going forward the way that organisational learning happens?
Yeah, I think there is a lot happening in that technology space. I guess just before I jump onto that, one other aspect of personalisation that I think it's worth calling out. I mentioned I did my Master of Education through UTS. They had a really interesting way of framing that program. At the very start and the very end of the program, you had these sort of capstone modules. So our first course was all about identifying what is it that I need to learn from this program? What are the things that I'm focusing on? And then your final piece is reflecting back as to how am I using this? And you need to produce some kind of a portfolio, or in my case, I actually put my website together to reflect on how you're applying that learning. So I thought that was it kind of links into some of the stuff that we're saying around universities and how they prepare people, but also that personalisation aspect of it. And I think that can be valuable even within organisations where you've got programs like this 9-month-long program. How are you helping people at the outset really identifying what is it that I'm expecting to get from this? What areas am I going to apply it to? And then at the end, reflecting back on how have they used that. And we do that currently through the coaching, but there are other ways that you can do that. So that's just to wrap up the personalisation piece. In terms of the future for learning within organisations, there is a lot happening within the way that data is being used, within the way that AI. Some of the things that I'm really excited about. In the past, I've really loved to be able to use actors within programs that I've run. I think that brings a practicality of it that is critical, and have run training programs as well as assessment centres where we've had actors that will come in, people will have real scenarios, they'll then get feedback on it. In some situations, we'll give them the opportunity to play back and try again and repeat. And you get a great level of insight from that you just don't get from doing activities with others, role playing with other people on the course, or even in reality. It's great when you can reflect, but rarely do you get the person on the other end of that conversation being able to say everything that they are experiencing and what worked and what didn't. What I'm seeing happening in the AI space now is there's tools that enable you to do that with AI. So obviously that reduces the cost and increases the degree in which you can run that across organizations. So I'm really excited about bringing some of that AI capability into, again, it becomes personalized, right? When I have an interaction in that way, it's a lot more customized than if I was to do an e-learning where there's maybe 2 or 3 different options and set responses, pulling in some of the AI ability to engage and respond to the full conversation. So I think that's quite exciting. I think there's a lot being done around how can we start to evaluate people's capability up front before putting them through a program. So I've seen this used in the space of e-learning, where rather than having to just do the standard module, you can do an assessment up the front, and then that will direct you to the areas where you need to do further development. So I think there's excitement there as well. I know there is excitement around virtual reality. I haven't come face to face with that yet. I can see potentials in that, but I think it's still at early stages. I know in some of the other areas where perhaps going out and doing more technical training and able to use augmented reality, there's certainly some great progress happening in that area, which I think is really powerful. So a lot of exciting things to come. Hopefully there'll be a lot more that I haven't heard about yet, that as we know with innovation and technology over the next few years, all sorts of new things will appear that will help us.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks so much for sharing so much in terms of your own organizational development and programs. I think that our listeners will take a lot away from that. I'd like to come full circle back to where we started the conversation, which I think was on permaculture. But just perhaps reflecting, given your origins in outdoor training and just thinking about what it is or other species about learning itself that is transferable. Any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a load there. I mean, I'm not a scientist myself, so I know that some scientists are great at going into that and looking at biomimicry and how we can learn from nature in those ways. For me, the permaculture approach is something that applies to the work I do in the garden, to environmental practices, but also just the way I live my life. And there's some great principles within that help me. I talked about that balance between theory and practice. One of the permaculture principles is observe and interact, and I think that's a great principle in any work. I think that's a critical problem for new leaders. I've seen the balance of that missed on many occasions. That could be the leader that comes in, and very commonly I see this. They've got all the answers because they've done it before. They start applying it and it just fails miserably because it hasn't been adapted to that situation. Likewise, you get people caught in the decision paralysis. If they're trying to understand what's going on, they're observing it, they're taking it in, but don't actually make the changes needed. So there's that delicate balance of how do I bring the changes whilst not being set on my own ways and observing how they're playing out. So that's a critical principle whenever I'm trying things out in nature, in the garden. I need to observe and interact with it to understand it. Same principle within organisations.
Yeah, I love that. And Matt, just in closing, as a lifelong learner, what's next on your agenda? What are you personally learning next?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say I'm midway through, or maybe not even midway. I'm on a journey at the moment with something called systemic modelling. So Caitlin Walker has got a book out around that from contempt to curiosity that I'd highly recommend other people go look at. So that for me has been really critical in how do you use questions that help groups to learn from one another and notice the dynamics within themselves. So really that enters into the space of group and team coaching, something which I'm quite passionate around. And I've been working with Caitlin for around 2 years now, building my skills and capabilities, and still have a lot more to go. So yeah, continuing to learn with that and to look at how we can implement that with supporting teams and groups.
Matt, thanks so much for your time this morning, and also just your generosity in sharing that your stories and reflections with us. I think it will certainly give us a nice thread for our organizational learning report, which comes out shortly, and love to include your various contributions in that. I think our listeners, particularly all our heads of learning and development, will find this very interesting and be able to probably borrow and apply a lot of what you've said today. So thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks, Paul. It's been a pleasure.